Greetings fellow casters, and welcome back to Caster's Corner, your guides in the ever-changing world of Elestria. I'll be your host once again, the Law YGO, here to discuss the results of the previous 2 weekends. So as many of you know, the first couple of tournaments of the Daybreak meta have finally occurred. We had a webcam tournament a couple weekends ago on the 14th of September, and we had an app tournament this past weekend on the 21st. As such, a lot of things have changed very rapidly in the meta, primarily at the hands of the private testing group that I am a part of. For those of you who are unaware, we were actively testing different strategies for both the webcam tournament and the app tournament, and a lot of things changed in between those two. From the webcam tournament, we saw that Fives was still the best deck in the room despite us trying to break it with Monarch. But we've also figured out a couple of interesting developments since then. Initially theorized by Spicy Sausage over in the main Elestrals server, and then modified by our very own Dymax in our testing server, we have a deck that very well should cause a ban. And since the list is already public, we're going to discuss it here. This is Fire FTK. Now, for those of you who are unaware, FTK is an acronym that stands for First Turn Kill. The idea of the deck is that we are going to attempt to burn out all 20 spirits from our opponent on the first turn, so they are not going to get an opportunity to play the game at all. Now, you might be thinking that this has something to do with Eruption, and you're kind of right, but also mostly wrong. Our main culprit this time is actually an Elestral from base set, Spire. Spire has the ability to disenchant a fire from itself in order to burn the opponent for 2. Normally, that would be kind of a ho-hum effect, but for some ungodly reason, they printed it to say that it could do this any number of times it wants to in a turn. This means that if you are able to load up Spire with, say, 11 fire spirits, you can fire it off 10 times in a row, even though you'd lose the Spire on the last trigger in order to burn your opponent out for 20 spirits. Now, getting a Spire to 11 fire spirits is the harder part, but as it turns out, there's a really simple way to do that. Released back in Frostfall, we've got ourselves 3 copies of Exalt Flare. Exalt Flare has the ability to nexus up to 2 fire spirits in order to ascend itself into another 1 or 2 fire cost Elestral in your hand. Because of this, you can go Exalt Flare into Exalt Flare, Exalt Flare into Exalt Flare, and then Exalt Flare into Spire, at which point the Spire will be coming down with a minimum of 10 spirits. Now, this strategy has been available to us since Frostfall, but has just not been the most consistent thing out there. So how in the world did it get more consistent with Daybreak? Ash Rabbit, or the less funny bunny, is that way. So you see, Ash Rabbit is really interesting in that Exalt Flare doesn't have to nexus onto itself in order to trigger its ascend. It can nexus onto anything, meaning that if you can get it out with an Ash Rabbit then allows you to effectively recur pieces back as you're comboing off in order to ensure that your combo goes off as smoothly as possible. On top of that, Ash Rabbit, being the fact that it's going to represent 1 additional fire spirit on your board, means that if you can get it on board with Exalt Flare for your main combo, your Spire can end with 11 spirits. When you ascend up from Exalt Flare into Spire, you're able to siphon spirits from any other Elestral on your board, meaning that you can take all the spirits off of Ash Rabbit and put them back onto the Spire. And since it's going to come down initially with a fire spirit, that means you're going to already have 11 fire spirits on your board, meaning that that is full combo in and of itself. As for our other Elestrals, we're playing basically a bunch of consistency tools, probably the most prominent of which is Drataya. Shouts out to Wirtz, it's the fruit package. It's always going to be here anytime we need to deep draw. On top of that, we've got ourselves 3 copies of Ampup. Ampup actually is very similar to that of Thunder Dragon from Yu-Gi-Oh! Able to discard itself and expend a Thunder Spirit in order to add 2 more copies of Ampup from your deck to your hand. This is really useful for deck thinning and also synergizes extremely well with a certain draw spell, which we'll go over soon. Lastly, for the Elestrals is 2 copies of Glimbat. So Glimbat was kind of left without a home after the banning of Sparkit, but now it finally found another one, being a consistency draw enabler, as you can cast it out, immediately disenchant its solar, and draw 2. So you're probably thinking to yourself right now, okay, that sounds great and all, but how are you getting this many Elestrals onto the board on the first turn? You only have 1 normal cast. Well, as it turns out, this particular deck doesn't have 1 normal cast. It has 4. We're playing 3 copies of Rise from the Ashes and 3 copies of Golden Apple of Discord. Golden Apple of Discord for 1 spirit will allow us to, most importantly, discard a card from our hand. This will allow us to put any Elestral from our hand into the discard pile so that we can then Rise from the Ashes it back. Now that sounds like it's extremely expensive. which it is, but the fact of the matter is we are playing all sorts of spirit recursion for one of our other parts of the package, so this actually is really not as bad as you think it is. And this will allow us to very easily get out both a copy of Exalt Flare and Ash Rabbit, which allows us to go full combo. As for that recursion, got ourselves 3 copies of Ambrosia and 3 copies of Ambrosia Cornucopia. Drataya is an insanely good deep draw tool, and as such, if you can stick a copy of Drataya and then fire off a copy of Ambrosia, you're going to be in a really good position, as you're going to be both recovering your spirits and deep drawing your deck. This gets really powerful late game with Cornucopia as well, as then you can go draw 3 and recur back 5, which that's really, really good. Past that, we've got a couple more draw tools here. The expected one is Nectar of the Gods, but probably the less expected ones are Drops of Lethe and Circle the Sky. Drops of Lethe is going to be really good in this particular deck, as your hand is going to get enormous at certain points of the game. So you can just pass back the cards you don't need, draw the cards you do. Circle the Sky kind of serves as a little bit of a preview of things to come in a way, as you can Nexus Spirits back onto your Ash Rabbit and then get your recursion off while also drawing a card. It's not the best, but it does make it to where you don't need as many spirits as you might think. Next up are our Nexus Banks. So for that, we've got ourselves 3 copies of Hephaestus, which is the best fire Nexus Bank, let's be completely fair, and then a single copy of Golden Fleece. Hephaestus in and of itself is mostly serving the purpose of just being a Nexus Bank, but also it allows us to play a single copy of Golden Fleece in here to search with Hephaestus to serve as another way to get more spirits onto our board to Nexus with. Golden Fleece is almost never going to be cast with 2 solar. It is almost exclusively going to be cast with 2 fire. But the way Hephaestus works here is it allows us to search for Golden Fleece, so it deck thins for us while serving as a Nexus Bank that is refillable at that point. Lastly, because we need a way to make the combo go off, just in case we can't quite get there, we're playing a single copy of Eruption. It's a burn deck. Eruption's going to be there one way or the other. Going into our spirits a little bit here, we've got ourselves 5 copies of Terratlas in order to enable Drataya and the Cornucopias. We've got 1 copy of Zaptor to enable the Ampup, 2 copies of Luminape to enable the Glimbats, and then 12 copies of Vipyro in order to pull off the FTK. Now for the FTK, you're going to need a couple of very specific things. You're going to need out an Exalt Flare and an Ash Rabbit. Both of these will already have 1 fire underneath them. And in your hand, you're going to need 5 cards specifically. You're going to need your other 2 copies of Exalt Flare, you're going to need 1 copy of Spire, and then 2 cards to serve as a Nexus Bank, one of those needing to be a Hephaestus. The other one can be a Golden Fleece if necessary. Now as for how the combo works here, we're going to go ahead and cast out Hephaestus. This serves as a bank of 4 fire spirits. We'll then go Exalt Flare effect to Nexus 2 onto the Ash Rabbit. Ash Rabbit's effect will then trigger to recur back something, and Exalt Flare's effect will trigger, putting it in the discard and ascending it up into another copy of Exalt Flare. Now this Exalt Flare can then Nexus 2 more spirits onto Ash Rabbit. Ash Rabbit then triggers to recur something. Exalt Flare once again triggers to ascend up into our 3rd copy of Exalt Flare. Kind of seeing where this is going most likely. Then we'll put down 1 more Nexus Bank here to put 2 spirits there, and we'll go Exalt Flare number 3, once again putting them onto Ash Rabbit. Ash Rabbit's effect then will allow us to recur again, and Exalt Flare's effect will allow us to ascend up into our Spire. And because we're ascending into Spire, it is able to siphon spirits off of any Elestral on the board for its ascension. As long as we use Exalt Flare as the primary ascension target, it does not matter. So at this point, we've gotten 3 recursions off with Ash Rabbit. We've also gotten an 11 spirit Spire onto the board, at which point we just start disenchanting from it in order to burn out the opponent. Since we can use that any number of times a turn, it doesn't really matter. We go burn for 2, burn for 4, burn for 6, burn for 8, burn for 10, burn for 12, burn for 14, burn for 16, burn for 18, and then our last one, our burn for 20, will put the Spire in the discard because it is under enchanted, but at that point our opponent is out of spirits. And that's kind of the gist of it. I'm going to be completely fair, Fire FTK is really consistent, and the only thing that really is able to stop it from the opponent is landing a proper Gorgon's Gaze if they are going first. If they're going second, they kind of just lose as long as you open the right cards. And opening the right cards is extremely easy because you can always just mulligan for them. With that said, thank you all for watching. If everything goes according to plan, we'll actually have another deck profile for you later in the week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, take care.